everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone here this morning to the May 7th, 2024 AM Board of Supervisors meeting. This morning, I'd like to ask everyone who's willing and able to stand for our invocation. I'd like to welcome the Reverend Gary Brown, who's going to lead us in our invocation, and then please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good morning. Let's pray. Our Father and our God, we just come saying thank you today. We want to thank you, Father God, for continuing to bless this body. We thank you, Father God, for continuing to allow those who stand in leadership to meet to discuss the needs of this community. Father, we thank you for just continuing to put it on the hearts and minds of those who care about their surroundings, Father God, to stand in position to be of help. Touch, Father God, each and every member. Bless this board and the county that they represent, Father God, that we might continue to live and work and thrive together in your name. We love you, Lord. We praise you. We thank you. It's in your precious name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Brown. At this time, I'd like to call to order the May 7th, 2024 AM Board of Supervisors meeting. And I'd like to ask Supervisor Lee if he would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first order of business is the approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Or a motion to approve? No. Hearing none, we'll proceed as presented. Item 2.02 is our consent agenda, and with this, I'll turn it over to our County Administrator, John Eggerston, to introduce these items.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the board. We have several items on consent this morning. Beginning with item A, the board will consider approval of the minutes from the April 2nd, 2024 AM and PM meetings. Under item B, the board will consider approving a resolution in support of an application for smart scale funds for improvements at the intersection of Route 229 and Route 694. The board previously endorsed submittal of this smart scale application in round 5. Under item C, the board will consider a budget amendment in the amount of $1,400,000 for additional revenue and expenses in the environmental services contract services budget to cover additional municipal solid waste disposal expenditures. Under item D, the board will consider acceptance of 3 donations received and a budget amendment in the total amount of $6,000 for the Sheriff's Office. The donations are to be used for the cadet program. Under item E, the board will consider acceptance of a grant and approval of a budget amendment in the amount of $1,000 for the Parks and Recreation Department. The funding is from the PATH Foundation for a special event. Under item F, the board will consider acceptance of a donation and approval of a budget amendment in the amount of $700 for the Parks and Recreation Department. The funds are from the Rappahannock Rapidan Community Services Board for the 2024 Kaleidoscope Art Camp. And under item G, the board will consider a budget amendment in the amount of $19,560 for community youth services. The funds are from the Virginia Juvenile Community Crime Control.
Thank you, John. Are there any questions or comments regarding the consent agenda?
Move to approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Moving on to item 3.0, general county business. The board will consider adoption of the proposed tax rates for the calendar year 2024. And with this, again, I'll turn this over to our county administrator to introduce it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This morning, under general county business, our next 4 items will all be related to the FY25 budget. We start always with the adoption of the proposed tax rates, which are for the calendar year of 2024. Those tax rates are displayed on the screen currently. They include no changes to any of our categories of personal property tax. They do include a 1 cent increase on the fire and rescue levy, which is part of the overall real estate tax, which is proposed to increase from 46 to 47 cents.
Thank you, John. Questions or comments for John concerning the tax rate?
Move we adopt the tax rates as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Carries unanimous, Ms. Ellis. Moving on to item 3.02, the board will consider adoption of the proposed operating and capital budget for fiscal year 2025. And again, John, if you'd introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The budget was presented at a public hearing held on April 16th, I believe it was. That presentation included all the details of the budget, and I did reattach it to board docs for your reference. Our finance director, Mrs. Lamb, has put the actual budget summary document on board docs, which reflects the proposed budget of $300,643,656. And rather than go into any of the detail this morning, I'll just ask if there are any questions.
Thank you, John. Questions or comments for John?
Mr. Chairman, just a comment. I'd like to thank the citizens of Culpeper and my colleagues on the board for supporting our public schools with this proposed budget, in particular the 5% raise increase for our teachers. I don't think that there's any better investment in our community than the investment in our public schools and our students and our teachers. That investment can only be maximized if we are hiring and retaining the very best teachers and principals for leadership in our schools, and that current 5% salary increase helps us maintain our competitiveness with the surrounding localities and helps us to accomplish that goal. So thank you, everybody.
Move to
approve the capital plan as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
Yeah, to clarify, this is the operating budget and capital plan, or just
No.
capital plan?
Operating budget.
Excuse me, operating plan
And capital, both?
and capital budget, yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yes, both.
So we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimous, Ms. Ellis. Moving on to item 3.03, the board will consider adoption of the proposed fiscal year 2025-2029 capital improvements plan. And again, I'll turn this over to John to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As noted, the budget was just adopted, including the capital budget, which covers fiscal year 2025, but we do have a capital improvements plan that extends out to 2029. That plan is subject to revision each year, but does try to paint a picture of what the next 5 years might look like. Mr. McLaren prepares that plan and has presented it at a previous work session. His presentation from that work session with any amendments is posted on board docs, and if you'd like him to go through that, we can, but I think that you're all fairly familiar with that plan at this point in time, and it is ready for adoption if you're ready to adopt it.
Thank you, John. Would anybody like Sam to go over this item by item? All right, any other questions or comments for John? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve the 2025 to 2029 capital improvements plan as presented.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous, Ms. Ellis. Moving on to item 3.04, the board will consider adoption of the fiscal year 2025 appropriation resolution. And again, John, if you'd introduce this item, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The final item budget-related this morning is the appropriation resolution for fiscal year 2025. The board has adopted the budget. This resolution enables the staff to begin spending it as of July 1st. And it is a full-year appropriation, and it's ready for your consideration.
Again, thank you, John. Questions or comments for John?
Not questions or comments other than for John, but for overall, if we have time, I would suggest that perhaps we send this to rules to look at it to see whether we should do annual or semi-annual or anything else, because there are, one, we need to consider the burden on staff, but two, we also need to consider are there situations where we would have been better off having a different appropriation schedule, and should we look at it differently? Because $300 million in one motion right here, and then we have a bunch of amendments but no other changes, we appropriate it all today, may not be optimal. It may be, but I just think it'd be worthwhile perhaps for rules to look at that.
I agree with the size of the budget that we're getting into and different things that are coming up and a lot of the capital improvements. I would be curious to see if maybe a biannual appropriations would be appropriate.
Noted. You got that down. Any other comments? Or we'll entertain a motion? Oh, I'm sorry, we've already got a motion and a second. All those in, no? Did we?
I was discussing that we send it to rules. If we need to do that in the form of a motion, I'll make a motion that we ask rules to consider this next week and put it back on our agenda with what they recommend. Oh, you weren't gonna have rules? Want Public Works to consider it?
We have a pretty full agenda.
We do. How about staff work with the chairman and whoever else feels that they want to offer input, and we put it on our agenda for our next meeting, our next full meeting? Okay.
So we have a motion and a second, and the motion is to have staff
Work with you.
and bring it back in June.
Yes.
As to whether we want to go with a biannual or annual appropriation
Yes.
for the,
Yes.
okay. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
A point of clarification, was that motion for future appropriations, or was that to delay the approval of this appropriation?
To delay the approval of this appropriation, this resolution specifically till next month.
Okay.
The other,
Right.
last year at this time.
I wasn't sure if you were talking about for next year.
Moving on to item 4.0, old business. 4.01, Mr. Tom Ennis will update the board regarding the progress with the Culpeper County / All Points Broadband Fiber to the Home project. And Mr. Ennis, if you'd like to come up.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity to provide an update on our broadband project. Recently, we've been working with staff to provide updates. We meet with them on a routine basis and come before you as well. In our last meeting, we got into a lot of details about the pole make-ready status, all of the details about the wires and the timelines and the steps. We were asked to remove some of those details to keep us out of the weeds and talk more at a high level, so I've done that here. If anyone would like a more detailed, in-depth discussion of each pole status, we'd be happy to do that for you. So, quick reminder of the VADI grant project. This is a partnership between the county, the state's Department of Housing and Community Development, Dominion Energy Virginia, All Points Broadband, the county, and Rappahannock Electric Cooperative. In terms of the financing, All Points is committed to a minimum of $12.5 million. Dominion Energy Virginia, through the Utility Leverage Program, they committed an estimated $2.9 million. That may fluctuate depending on the cost of construction. They can participate in this program a little bit differently than REC because they are an investor-owned utility and not a cooperative. DHCD, they have a program called the Virginia Telecommunications Initiative. We were awarded an $8.6 million grant to that program. It's a grant that the county has applied for a couple of times. This one is $8.6 million, also capped for the state's expenditure there. And then the county put up $6.6 million of its American Rescue Plan Act funding, also capped. So if there are cost increases, which we've all seen with inflation and supply chain issues, that's borne by All Points. For our utility partners, REC and Dominion also participate as pole owners. This, as you all know, a lot of ISPs that are like All Points Broadband, we don't own the poles. We seek permission to attach to poles owned by other companies, REC and Dominion. There's a long, drawn-out process for the engineering, the cost estimate, the construction to make those poles ready for our attachment. Not just in Culpeper, but across the state. This is a huge issue for broadband deployments. We've hit this a number of times in details about the status and the steps there. We are still focused on make-ready. We are in the best spot that we have been with REC. And Dominion keeps making a lot of progress. In the last couple of months, Dominion has committed or continued to hit records in terms of their pole attachment requests being sent back to All Points Broadband. In a typical year before these broadband deployments, a company like Dominion would get 8,000 or 10,000 applications across its entire territory. Last year, they got 125,000. For us, they're doing about 2,500 or 3,000 a month. So huge improvement there. Huge improvement there. They're also committed to the middle mile construction. Two different departments at Dominion, but that is how they partner with us. So at the end of the day, you're going to get 480 brand new miles of fiber infrastructure. It's going to last for the next 30 or 40 years. We build to a level of service that is 10 times greater than what you could subscribe to today. For a couple of reasons. One, we need the extra capacity in there for the 4,200 customers in the project. But we also need excess capacity in the future for new home developments. We've had a lot of growth in the county. If folks weren't originally included in our project, we need to have capacity there for them in the future. Like I said, we're hitting 4,200 locations. Those are the blue dots on the map here. We can't change the grant application now. We get a lot of requests to add folks to this project. There are a couple other programs coming down the pike. I know you all have an application pending through this program with another provider. That is yet to be determined, but we can't change the grant area that we have today. So the three key dependencies, having the middle mile capacity in place. Last month, Dominion was at 50% construction complete. Now they're at 80%. It is the highest percent of middle mile in all of our portfolio for this year. They're really knocking it out in Culpeper for their middle mile capacity. Utility make ready, this is the process to get the poles up and ready for our attachments. We have restarted that process for submissions with Dominion. We've completed all of the fielding. Our skilled labor vendor, the Timmons Group, is going through the engineering work. We're going to restart our submissions to REC in July. And at the end of the day, we need a significant queue of miles in a row before our fiber can be constructed. A larger issue at the beginning of the project was making sure that the supply chain and all the materials were in place. That is on track according to plan. We're going to have the materials in our Brandy Station location before construction. We also have a lot of materials for this project in Ashland. If anyone would like to go to either of these sites, we can set that up. the state agency will want to go and see these laydown yards and the construction facilities. So all of the pole fielding is done. The applications are now restarting with Dominion and REC in July. Again, it was a huge volume of work, not just in our project, not just in Culpeper. We have turned the battleship in the right direction, making a lot of progress here with both of the pole owners and our vendors. We work with them on a daily or weekly basis to prioritize areas that we can get released to construction. So that may mean that an area of Culpeper gets service, a couple of months before another. We're going to go to areas where the make-ready is happening first. And we're not going to wait for all of the county to be done before we release smaller sections. Most importantly for aligning incentives is that there are no more dollars that come to All Points Broadband until we build that last mile and make service available. So we've been reimbursed for a portion of our expenses to date. That happened, I think, the third or fourth quarter last year. There are no more dollars that come to us until we actually deliver the fiber and make it available for your residents. So our incentives are huge. We have a lot already invested in materials and construction and engineering. Nothing comes back to us until we finish what we said we were going to do. Just continuing on the project status, again, this is a great achievement for Dominion in the middle mile that we need. They're 80% done. Last year, we had told you all about a price increase on REC's middle mile. We had to redesign our backhaul network. We committed to doing that by the fourth quarter. We've done that work. It did require a little bit more pole fielding and change in the network design, but we are stewards of our dollars and your dollars, and the cost was too high to rely exclusively on REC in their territory. The Timmons Group has done our pole fielding. They do our engineering work. They fielded 10,700 poles. We probably will attach to about 9,000, maybe 9,200 of those, but we need to do engineering on adjacent poles that we don't attach to because our wires impact the safety of those poles as well. So those include poles in our original design, poles for their redesign and a change in engineering standards. And then in some cases, if the middle mile fiber is built in between the time that we go collect data on a pole and we attach, and we submit an attachment application, we may have to go back out in the field and verify where that fiber was attached. Like I said before, we have restarted our applications in Dominion. It will resume for REC in July. Make ready is still the cadence for when we can release our fiber to construction. And then a reminder to send folks to apbfiber.com. They can verify their location, whether or not it's in the project, and sign up for notifications. We had a question last time about the notifications that people receive. So we did a mailer last fall to remind people to sign up for the project. When we started these projects, we were sending notifications out, but we found that a lot of people would just unsubscribe or not pay attention to an email. The one that we want them to pay attention to is the day that they can sign up for actual service. So they're not going to get spammed or get any notification until that date, and it's about 90 days in advance of when service is available in their neighborhood. We want people to pre-register. They don't have to. They will still be included in the project, but this is the best way for them to get a notification. In between the 90 days in advance of service and for, I think, at least 60 days after, they're going to get a series of flyers and emails reminding them to sign up, getting them ready and prepared for an additional year, regardless of how long the VADI project goes before closeout. For an additional year after they could sign up, they will get an install fee at a flat rate and not have to pay any kind of per-foot charge. The per-foot installation cost is the main barrier to people having broadband in rural areas. If they were to go sign up for broadband at Comcast, say, and it's outside the Comcast territory, they could get an installation fee of $20,000 or $25,000. In our project, if you are in our project, you'll get a $199 installation cost. That was the goal of the county, the goal of All Points, the goal of the program is to reduce that installation fee. I wish they could all sign up today. I know you all do as well. The project doesn't return anything financially for us until people can sign up. That is the main thing that we're driving towards. And I wish we could send that notification today. We can't. But that is what we are focused on. We're laser focused on that with our cooperative partners, with Dominion, and with the state agency. And whenever the state asks us questions, we work with staff to get a response back that is detailed. We did that recently back in March. And if any of you all have questions about a neighborhood or an address, or what is the status in your particular district, we'd be happy to set up a meeting. We can go through the engineering file and get into more in-depth discussion. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ennis. Questions or comments from Mr. Ennis?
So I do have one question. You say the make-ready cadence is the primary determinant of the last mile construction, and you're saying that you're not even going to start construction until October?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And of these pole attachment applications, how many have been, since you've restarted the Dominion ones, how many of them have been completed since the restart?
So we put in 400 at the end of April. And we expect, that was just the start of the Dominion one. Dominion across our portfolio returns about 2,500 to 3,000 a month across all of our projects. So when this restarts in full, they'll be hitting well above that.
And what is the reason for the delay in resuming the REC territory pole attachment applications?
Like Dominion, we have a system-wide commitment on throughput for REC. There is a lot of engineering work that goes into an REC pole relative to the engineering work that goes into a Dominion pole. In some areas, we're dealing with databases from legacy networks that the data is not as consistent as the pole owner or as an attacher maybe had hoped or assumed in the beginning of the project. So the poles that go through the REC process just take more individual engineering analysis. And
Before you actually submit the
before we
application?
actually submit an attachment application. We can't run those through any kind of automated system. It is an engineer looking at multiple sources of data to get the lateral loading analysis done.
Okay, and that kind of stuff wasn't completed during that utility pole fielding assessment?
It's the same company. They do all the fielding to determine the math that they got to do for the lateral loading and the clearance. And that is the same company that's doing it. They're doing about 500 poles a week now. But that is a lot of engineers sitting down and doing poles individually. If you had a pole database where all of the attachments and all of the details were exactly correct, you could run it through a larger automated system, but it's just not the way that the data is.
And based on the timelines that Dominion and REC give you for the response to those pole attachments and the approvals, is it actually feasible to start last mile construction in October?
It is feasible, but that bullet point of all three of us and our vendors focusing on the timeline is critically important. So we have to prioritize down to the smallest level of poles and strand parts that we can release to construction. So we put in a pole attachment request in the order that we think it should be constructed. They come back, generally, the first strand parts that come back are the ones that don't need any work, right? And that's not the exact same order that we would build them in. So we have been putting the pressure on for just volume across the system. And now, for the last couple of months, we've also been saying, okay, volume is important. We're going to stop beating up everyone about the volume. We need to be focused on a certain fiber service area so that we can get construction released. But a key to this is the three companies and our vendors who, we've tried to align incentives as much as we can in the right direction, but we all have to stay focused on prioritization.
Okay, thank you.
So on this slide, you list the three things that need to be happening. So one, middle mile capacity in place. When do you anticipate all middle mile capacity will be in place?
So when our last report, the Dominion Middle Mile was at 50% construction. That was, I think, at end of March when we submitted that. Now they're at 80% construction.
So where's RECs?
We redesigned our backhaul to minimize the REC reliance. That's going to be part of our own network. We just added fiber strands to distribution fiber that we would have built. So we will call it, backhaul or middle mile, but it'll be in the exact same cable as ours. We just expanded the cable count and maybe took a couple alternative routes.
So you are going
But
to,
REC is built, they've built their middle mile.
right. So, but for the network, the backhaul, are you going to do that at the same time you're doing last mile construction, is what you're saying, I guess?
Yes, that is, we do not have to wait for middle mile construction to be complete before we do our construction. But we do need it, obviously, for connectivity back to the internet. So they can run in parallel, not in series.
Okay, well, the next one you have on here, utility make ready. When do you anticipate REC will be 100% make ready, and when do you anticipate Dominion will be 100% make ready?
We expect by October to have enough make ready done to begin releasing our construction.
Okay, when do you expect they'll be complete?
Hopefully, by the end of the year or the very beginning of next year, but hopefully by the end of this year.
So how many poles do you think REC is going to have to replace between, I guess, July and the end of the year?
So typically they would replace low or mid single digit poles on a strand part. But we don't know that until it gets through the make ready construction process.
But right now roughly what it would be, don't you? Because you've already had Timmons look at all the poles.
Right, so out of every 100 poles, maybe 3 get replaced. Now, there are some poles that get a new guy wire, or we have to relocate a transformer. But in terms of full pole replacement, it's a much lower percentage.
For me, and I've talked to you about this before, I represent the western part of the county. One, I believe we're all frustrated, but the western part of the county is very frustrated because on the Madison side, fiber is being run, and people are getting their notices and being connected. They use the same substation as the Culpeper side, but in Culpeper, it's going to be I believe, more than a year, optimistically, before they get a notice, and that is unbelievably frustrating. So,
Yes, and I know that, and we've, the engineering standards for our fiber is different, even though it looks the same. The engineering standards for the way that we attach is different than an attachment from a fiber owned by the pole owner. And that causes some issue. When it gets to the actual construction and replacing a pole, if it's a single-phase pole, and they're relatively close by, a crew can do 4 or 5 in a day. So the replacing a pole, once we get to that point, I don't want to say it's not routine, but it takes it's a couple hours once you have all the engineering done, all the materials there, and the crews are ready. And I know that REC, they have the crews, they're ready to rock and roll once we get through the engineering and cost process.
okay, well, the optimistic assessment is that everybody that's the 4,200 plus will have fiber by the end of February. I'm wondering what would be the realistic assessment, and then what's the pessimistic assessment relative to those two?
I mean, that is the schedule that we are holding ourselves to Dominion and REC and our vendors. If the poles are in more disrepair and need more work, then it is going to take longer for that make-ready, but there's going to be enough poles that we can go out and we can release construction and get people signed up.
I'm concerned that I think we had this same conversation a year ago. The only
Yes,
the
we
only
did.
difference being
did,
that it was
Tom.
February of '24 rather than February of '25.
That- and-
So I'm
and-
concerned we'll be having it at the same time next
Well,
year.
And
I-
they're
I
all-
think
and-
that-
And Tom, let me piggyback on what you're saying. They're all great questions, but how many times has he been up here? It's sent by Jimmy Carr, because Jimmy Carr does not want to be here. To me, you know, I've been here for 9 years, and I don't know about the history of Culpeper and contracts and procurement, but this undoubtedly, since I've been here, is the worst contract and relationship we've ever had. And I'm really frustrated about it. And, you know, you're talking about dollars due. There are no dollars due by us. There should be penalties involved with you guys as far as timelines that have been promised and haven't been met. And it, you know, there's no excuse in my opinion. And I hope there's an online review or feedback that we can give in the future, just, you know, about the relationship we've had, because, I mean, this doesn't work in the private sector, and we shouldn't have to go through this in the public sector, in my opinion.
I hear you. I'm just as frustrated. In the way that the program is set up, it is a cost reimbursement program. We put out our timelines, we put out our partnerships, we put out everything that we did was to comply with this specific grant program. I know that the county has applied 4 times. I know that it is a state program trying to run federal dollars and county dollars through the same thing, and it is very frustrating. And then you add on top of that, you have poles that we don't own that we need to make ready, and we don't have insight on it, and we give you a timeline based on what we expect, and we can't hit that. And I know that it's frustrating.
Could you tell me how much money you've received from the county so far and from the state for Culpeper work?
Yes, sir. 1.7 million.
1.7?
Yes.
Isn't it more like 12 million
No.
total?
That's what we've committed to. So that is after the state and the county reimbursement, we will have still put up 12.5 million.
Okay, and how many houses have been connected?
None.
And your date to have this done was what originally, for the original contract?
So the program puts out guidelines for 18-month projects. That's what we committed
But
to.
the original contract said this would be completed when?
In February
Of what year?
this year.
Okay?
Yeah. So
Do you-
across the portfolio of this program, there were, I think, 35 project extensions. The one we submitted for Culpeper was reviewed by the state. They know the underlying trends, and they approved it promptly. And I know that it's frustrating, but the way that the contract is set up is that we hit certain milestones, we demonstrate those expenditures, we get a portion reimbursed. The next time that happens is not until Culpeper residents have broadband.
The frustrating part of this to me is we entered into a contract, and All Points was to provide service to our constituents.
Yes.
You have not lived up to that.
So-
In that contract, you point out that your partner is Rappahannock Electric. It is Dominion. None of these things are new or are a surprise. You knew they were there originally.
Yes, so the way that the program works, generally, is that for every dollar on a monthly basis, for every dollar of expense, the ISP sends a bill to the county and the state. So if we went out and bought $1 million worth of fiber, we would charge you for 20% of that, right? Even if it's out on a warehouse. We worked with the county and we said, you know, that doesn't provide quite enough oversight or skin in the game for All Points. So the way that our contract works is that even if we have expenses along the way, we can only get a reimbursement from you after agreed-upon milestones. So the first one was to have the field-validated design, and that was a trigger for the first reimbursement. Now, if we go out and we buy a bunch of materials, any other participant in this program, if they bought a bunch of materials or they paid for make-ready construction, that month they would send you a bill. And based on that contract, that is when you would pay. The incentive for us is that all those months of expenses from now until then, we don't get reimbursed until the very end. And we are at a lower rate than most of the applicants in the program, and that's why we won. It's a competitive process. You bid for a lower dollar and county amount. The other two applications that the county put together were at a higher level and were not awarded. And the way we impose that restriction on us and align incentives is to get the reimbursement at the end of the project. And so I know that the original contract was to deliver locations service by February. We still don't get reimbursed until that happens. And I understand that it's frustrating. It is not a typical design bid build contract where you're building a school or a building. It is a cost reimbursement from a program that is multiple levels of government trying to work together. And it can be very frustrating for all stakeholders. And you all in particular, this is a big problem for you. I remember when you all made this decision to partner with us, and I wish we had better news today.
Any other comments? Mr. Ennis, I just want to say, I agree 100% with what this board is feeling, and frustration doesn't even touch the way I feel right now. To add that other ISP providers started pretty much a year after you and have gotten, I don't know how many of your customers now, when it comes time to hook them up, you're probably going to find that a large portion of them are going to say, we don't need your fiber because they've gone to another ISP. And my biggest concern is we continue on this same road, and this time next year, we're going to be hearing, skirting around questions. I don't know when this is going to happen. This has to take place before this we're not, the bottom line, we're not going to have fiber to our constituents. And I, for one, think that we really need to look long and hard on how much more we want to continue down this path. But this is, I agree with Supervisor Deal. This has been in the private sector, this would not have flown, I can tell you. And it's very, very frustrating. So, any other comments, questions? Thank you, Mr. Ennis.
Yes.
Moving on to item 5.0, new business. .501, the board will consider awarding a 4-year contract for airport engineering consultant services to Avcon Incorporated. And again, with this, I'll turn it over to our county administrator to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The county retains an engineer at all times for consulting on all of our airport projects. The FAA, who pay for the vast majority of all these projects, requires that we have that general services contract for airport engineering in place, and also that it be subject to competitive procurement every 4 years. Our 4 years came due. We did, with Alan Culpeper's help, release an RFP for these services for the airport. We ended up having 4 engineering firms submit proposals. The interview team, which was made up of several airport advisory committee members, the airport manager, and myself, interviewed 3 of the 4 firms, and we are recommending today award of the contract for airport engineering to Avcon Incorporated.
Thank you, John. Questions or comments for John, or do we need Alan to elaborate? Mr. Culpeper? No questions or comments? Entertain a motion.
I move that we award for airport engineering consultant services to Avcon Inc.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous, Ms. Ellis. Item 5.02, the board will discuss and consider approval of proposed changes to the bylaws of the Public Transportation Board, PTB. And again, John, if you would introduce this item, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, I can kick this off. The Public Transportation Board is made up of various representatives. It is a town and county partnership, and so these bylaws do have to be approved by both the Board of Supervisors and the Town Council. But the Transportation Board has sent forward some, what I would describe as very minor amendments to their bylaws. I'll just quickly highlight that the first thing is to change the requirement of membership from the Rappahannock Rapidan Community Services Board to simply Community-Oriented Services Organization. There's also a change that clarifies the use of Robert's Rules of Order. And also, rather than having a bylaw that states the exact order of business for the board's agendas, it simply says that these items would be components to be included at the discretion of the chairman of the Public Transportation Board. And that is the entirety of those changes, I believe. Brian Rothamel is our staff person on that board, and if he has any additions, I'd ask him to state those, and if there are any questions, I'll probably look at Brian to help me answer them.
I just move that we approve this.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Item 5.03, the board will hear an update regarding the bidding for the public swimming pool project and will consider authorizing staff to prepare contracts for award. And again, John, if you would, or Mr. Hardy, Andrew, if you want to.
How's everyone doing today? I'll try to be brief in my presentation today. Let's go ahead, if you don't mind, Kim, we'll do that one presentation that's up there. And you know when I come with documents, you know, I got to remember some numbers and so forth. So real quick, good morning, John, Chairman Bates, members of the Board of Supervisors. This process, as many know, is a partnership between the town and the county. Before I do get started, I do want to recognize county staff for their diligence over the last year and some change on this project. Many are in this room. We've had to move pretty swiftly with this particular project because we have to have a contract if it is going to proceed with the town by July 31st, just as a little caveat for that. As far as the project summary goes, the Culpeper County Community Pool is envisioned to be a seasonal outdoor aquatics facility located adjacent to the Culpeper County Fieldhouse at the sports complex. It will be managed by the Parks and Recreation team for Culpeper County. And as far as the operations and contribution agreement, we thought that it was important to kind of refresh folks' memory on that. As far as the funding goes, the town is providing $5 million through ARPA funds for the construction of the pool. And the community pool will operate 7 days per week from Memorial Day through Labor Day. And again, it can be utilized by residents of the county and the town alike. The county and town shall also share all costs associated with the operations and the maintenance of the pool at a 50-50 split. So again, the pool will be seasonal, operating 7 days a week, and then a 50-50 split on the maintenance operational cost. Within the agreement itself, there were minimum design parameters that were put in place, as including 3,300 minimum water area, minimum depth of 0 to 5 foot, and then again, appropriate pool size facilities to include men's, women's, female restrooms, and family-style concession areas and restroom portions. The proposed site, as noted on this, is the pie-shaped structure directly off of Cyclone and Competition. The star to the north is actually the Culpeper County Fieldhouse, so you'll see the proximity between the two amenities. And actually, it's not noted on the particular map, but up in the corner is the trolley stop that was just previously approved a couple months back to aid with transportation to get to and from these sites. And to the south is a parking lot, which is also looked at being funded to help with parking, not only for the complex and the field house and the athletic fields, but the pool when it comes online as well. The overall specs, as noted on this particular slide, the leisure pool itself is over 6,500 square feet with a 1,250 water play area or a splash pad. And then the building itself is 5,250 square feet. Now that includes men's, female, family, restrooms, concession stand, an office for CCPR staff, a rentable and usable meeting room, concession stand, and filter room. So again, it is a support facility that would allow our department to manage the staff. Also on property to the lower left are two 20-by-20 shelters. They would be just standard on concrete and available for rent and just general use. The pool itself, and I know I'll go into those specs, so just bear with me, are 6 25-meter lap lanes, a beach access, leisure access point there where it kind of bows out around the circle that bottles to those lap lanes. Within the pool right now, we have spec'd for a water bucket feature there to add for the little ones while they're moving around. Visual from the inside looking at the pool. So if you can imagine yourself looking through the entrance, which is where that blue pole is leading out to the parking lot. Entrance main lobby looking into the pool, so blue pole behind towards where the pool area would be, and the reception desk is there on the right. And then this is in the lobby looking back out to the parking lot again with the reception area to the left. Now, with this particular facility too, when it came to the design standards, we did take long-term maintenance into consideration as well. Hardy plank and other materials that are weather-friendly within an open-air environment like this were utilized and are spec'd within the sheet, because the last thing we wanted to do was build a facility that ended up 10, 15, 20 years down the road was going to cost us a substantial amount of money on the long-term maintenance. The splash pad itself, this is an itemized layout of the amenities and actual equipment that would be set on it. It is some standard items that you'll see familiar at Rockwater Park and other splash pads. 400 square foot of the 1,250 is also specifically designed for toddlers, you know, the littlest ones within our user groups, because we wanted it to be very family friendly. You can note on there many of the items between the arches that they run through. There'll be a splash feature. Then we've got various pop-up rocks. Should be an extremely nice amenity to add, coupled with the lap lane and the leisure pool itself. So within the bid process, this was the second time that we put it out to bid, as many of you guys know. We made some modifications as far as the design goes, the material list that we were utilizing in order to get the price more suitable for our interest. The pool itself had 4 bids, and then the building itself had 1. And that was another major change that we did as far as the bidding process as well. Before, it was one total package, pool and building. And then we stepped away and decided to split it, that the pool is 1 bid and the building is a secondary bid. That resulted actually in a huge savings, as noted on the slide up there. And let me go to my page real quick because I'm without my glasses today. That the pool building and the facilities came in at $3,485,000. The leisure pool and splash pad came in at $1,121,000. And with the soft costs, we're looking at $459,450 for a grand total of $5,065,450 for this particular project. Now, again, that does not include, as it's noted with the asterisks, any type of contingency. And based on this price point, a 10% contingency would be roughly about $521,000
nor does it include the removal of the spoils, which again, we're estimating about 415 square yards of materials at those price points of $80 for the pool and $35 per square yard for the building itself. As far as funding goes, we've outlined that it's $5 million through the ARPA funds through the town, leaving just a remaining balance of $65,450 on the county's end to support to make this project a reality. So before I move off of this slide, are there any questions from the board that I could address real quick before we move forward?
Yes, sir, I have a question. The lap lane area, is there a deep end for diving?
So the pool itself, because of liability concerns, we are not having any diving. The depth is set at 6'9", which is standard for teaching swim lessons and any type of scuba. We are not installing diving boards.
My concern there, and I'm not a swimming pool expert, but I do like to swim. My concern is that without a deep end, often I have found that swimming pools that water will overheat. Are we going to be able to do anything to make sure that that doesn't happen without having water at a greater depth?
So the pool is designed to be a skimmer pool, so the water will be circulating and filtering through the pool. I can't imagine that the water temps on the lap lane side should be a primary concern. I do not believe, and we can check with our AE individual. If there were any concern of temps, it may be more in the shallow end where the heat is going through, 2 inches of water on that zero entry level. But I've never known a particular scenario where the outside temperature adversely impacted it.
I have seen that happen greatly. I would like for you to look into that.
Okay.
Please. And then the other comment was the parking lot area, that's currently where soccer is played, correct?
So that's practice field A, and it's used for the Little Comets program. But we've already talked with the Culpeper Soccer Club, and they're able to relocate
We can find
that.
space for that?
Yes,
Okay.
sir, absolutely.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I'll take a look at the cooling.
Yes, sir, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Not a comment for you, Andrew,
Yes, sir.
but I would like to thank, I'd like to thank Supervisor Deal for all of the work that he's put in on this. This thing was getting off track. It was getting several $1 million above what we were looking at. He went out and called a lot of the local pool providers, got us multiple bids, and has got this back on track. And that's extraordinary, and thank you, and I'm glad that we've got it where the numbers make sense.
Any other questions before we slide forward?
Finally, some great news today, Andrew.
Well,
Thank you.
I'll tell you, Supervisor Deal, this has been an exciting project from start to finish, and it's a unique one that coming on the back half of this presentation, excited to bring some outstanding news to you guys. The price points came in, when you're looking at, we started this adventure, I want to say it was roughly about 2 years ago, with the cost of labor, supplies, equipment, to be able to get this exact same facility, 2 years later at the cost we are, I think we are exceptionally fortunate. And then we do have the team in place right now within the Parks and Rec Department to manage it, to operate it, to be able to offer improved services to the residents of the town and the county. So we're excited to see where this project goes forward with. But again, at the end, we're looking again, just $5,065,000 without a contingency on that. And for action requested today, we're looking for you guys to authorize the staff to bring forward official contracts to you in June for your consideration and potential signature. At that, I'll take any more questions you guys like.
Go ahead.
You said that the removal of the spoils was gonna be about 450,000?
No,
Or-
we're estimating 415 square yards for the two, and the price points, I believe off the top of my head, is 80 for the pool, and I think 30 for Taft.
Right, per cubic yards, but what's the total cost that you're expecting for the removal of spoils?
415 times 80, was that $3,200 roundabout?
Okay. And then the 521,000 for the contingency, so what we're really looking at from the county is about $600,000.
Correct, and that is if we utilize that contingency. But again, with the contingency, it's mainly us going into the project to protect ourselves if something change order related or we find something. And it's not our intent to ever slide into the contingency as an operating or development budget. It's more of just a safety net for us.
Okay, and then within these contracts, are there any either incentives or disincentives for the timeliness of construction and all that kind of stuff? Because as we saw with all points to the fact that you're saying 480 days to complete the building and the support facilities, is there a per day penalty that they have to pay if they don't meet that within the contracts that you guys have released? Same goes with the pool, to ensure that we have something that is on schedule.
Yeah, I can defer to Alan if that's some language that we can put in there.
Yes, ma'am. Within the bidding process, I believe the pool itself, I want to say it was 100 calendar days. The building, or the structure of the building was 480 days, calendar days, I want to say. Within our contract, any day, and this starts when the notice to proceed is issued. And then after that, if the contractor does not meet that within the required time, it's $100 a day liquidated damages.
Is that amount typical?
Yes, ma'am, for all our county contracts, we do 100. We can increase that, but the bid, when it went out, stated $100 a day.
Okay, thank you.
Now, with this particular project too, our goal is to have it open and operational Memorial Day of May 2026. So we do have a nice runway as far as time goes. And thus far, the projects, at least on the Parks and Recreation side, we've had really good success with meeting timelines. And for this particular one, and it's 290 days for the pool on that end. So we do have some time. We are going to get the contractors together to make sure we can maintain that timeline, because with a seasonal pool, it is critical that we do hit those opening timelines, because if you don't, you're really going to lose another full year. So again, that's where staff, we're just going to have to be on our toes to make sure we're managing the project, managing the contractors, ensuring that all of the projects are moving in sequence with one another.
The $100 a day in liquidated damages, we look at it in proportion to the cost of the project and the duration. So for this, I don't think we can change, but there is some penalty that's good. But in the future, like if we're doing a $5 million project, it may make sense to have it closer to $500 a day or $1,000 a day relative to that.
That would require a change in our purchasing policies and that type of thing.
No,
correct?
ma'am, it's at the purchasing agent's discretion.
Okay, okay.
So, great, I would just suggest that we do it in proportion. Cool.
Andrew, I have concern about this 521,000. So the only contingency I would see that I could, is there a rock clause or something in the contract? Because I don't know how you could come up with a $521,000 unforeseen expenses if the contract is, you know.
So we've done all of the soil testing and found that the soil is, from the areas that we've pulled, suitable, and no rock was seen. The main part is that's just a 10% standard, that the specs are one piece, but when you're kind of getting into a project, there are items that may come up. It is the board's discretion that if you'd like to look at dropping that to a 5%, 8% contingency, that's something we could explore doing, and we would leave that to y'all's discretion.
Is the contract with these, are the contractors made aware? I mean, is it like a not to exceed amount, or do we have a plan that if it does, we run into something that was unforeseen, that we could lower the, some of the materials or bring some of the add-ons off of the project?
I believe, and Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, the contract would be for the items such as the add-ons, and we wouldn't have the latitude to pull, would we?
If it's my understanding, Mr. Bates, we're asking for a lump sum is in accordance with the bid. Anything beyond that will require a change order, but being a construction, this is a bid, this is what we want, and they have priced it accordingly with the materials that they need.
Yeah, so I don't think that once the project starts, if an unforeseen item comes up, I don't know that we've got the ability to modify those specs to kind of reduce those costs. So again, it's more of a safety blanket. We're gonna stay on top, we're gonna manage the project as we would, and then if something does come up, obviously we would bring it to you all's attention that you'd be aware of it at that time, so.
Thank you, Andrew.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we authorize staff to bring forward contracts for award at the June board meeting.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. That's 5-2, Ms. Ellis. Moving on to our committee reports. First up is our Public Works Committee.
No action items, sir.
Next is Building and Grounds.
No action items.
Up next is Rules Committee.
The Rules Committee brings forward to the board a motion that the Board of Supervisors direct the planning staff to develop ordinance amendment options regarding the regulation of subdivisions in the A1 and RA zoning districts, and that those options be brought to the board for discussion at its August meeting. I'm not sure. I would like to amend the motion. Do we want to have discussion first before that,
I
or?
was going to say we have a motion and a second. Discussion? Or you want to, if you want to?
Yes. So I would like to amend the motion that we direct the planning staff to work with the planning commission to develop the ordinance amendments and then be brought for discussion at the September meeting.
Okay, I'll, first, for just the amendment, to me, this process, if we're gonna begin this, and one, I think we got a lot going on, now's not a good time to begin this, but if we choose to begin looking at zoning and subdivision rules for 90% of the county, it probably should kick off with work sessions at the board level, because we perhaps need to come up with some concept of, in general, what we want to do before we then send it to the planning commission. I mean, I look at what we've done with other major changes to the county. Some high-level board input would probably be the way to go. But once again, so I don't want to just send it to the planning commission. So for the amendment, I'm against it. But frankly, hopefully we don't even kick this thing off right now.
I would also like to make a comment about this is in direct accordance with our comprehensive plan, and the action item does specifically state to revise portions of the zoning and subdivision ordinances such as acreage requirements and minor subdivision rules to limit the amount and impact of development in areas outside the identified growth areas, specifically on A1 and RA. So I think the plan, or the comprehensive plan, provides a decent starting point for us to go ahead and put forth this process to basically just do what the comprehensive plan wants. And as far as the amount of land, 50% of the parcels in both A1 and RA are already at their smallest denomination. So yes, it's 80% of the zoning designation, but I don't believe that it's actually 80% of the land or 80% of the landowners.
Mr. Chairman, if I can make a comment, I would like to state that I do support my colleagues on the Rules Committee in their efforts to support the land use goals and the 2023 Comprehensive Plan. I personally think that perhaps a better way forward for us would be, I think we need to try to include more citizen input, and that possibly considering hiring an independent third-party consultant to help us find a way forward to accomplish our land use goals might be something that we might consider that could prove to be satisfactory for all concerned.
Further comment?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that the growth of our county is something we need to look at, and we need to manage the growth as we move forward. And there is no time like the present to begin that process. I don't believe we're here today to make decisions as to how this will end up, but I think we should move forward, engage the Planning Commission to start to look at some things that could be tweaked or looked at differently, and move this process along.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with that, but I'm hoping that we don't decide to go the route of Rappahannock and put a bubble on Culpeper to where you're going to, I mean, for me, I think you still need to maintain a balance, and there should be a way. I have no problem with taking it to the Planning Commission, talking about it, having work sessions, but I'm hoping we don't put a bubble on us to where we're separating cultures and people to where we're become elitists and not allow people and their families to search out housing in Culpeper. And it becomes all about view sheds. And another thing, I don't want to penalize the people that have been here for a long time that own property. It could be farmers, it could be people that have lived in our community a long time that may need to sell a piece of land to, for their livelihoods, for their future, for their families. I think that's important. I mean, I don't want to penalize them. Hoping we can come up with a way to where, you know, we don't penalize the people that have been here for a long time. And that, you know, we don't create a bubble to where we don't allow, you know, anybody in, or, you know, we become an aristocratic community. So.
Thank you, Gary. I'll be honest, I don't think that going the Rappahannock route, I think that ship has sailed. There's no way that we're gonna go back and do what Rappahannock has done. But I agree with you in the fact that I think we can reach a balance here, because we have a valuable resource in this county, which is our rural area, that if we're not careful, it's gone. And once it's gone forever. So I think the first step in this, and there's been a lot of speculation that, you know, on what we're gonna do, and there's been nothing decided. What we're doing here is we're instructing staff to work with the Planning Commission and get us something back, some options. Let's look at these options and see if we can hit a compromise that is protecting the rights of the landowner, but yet we're protecting the resource here that we can't replace once it's gone. And Culpeper is known, the reason people move here is because we have the perfect scenario. We've got, you know, the tax rate, the shopping, the dining, the farms, the rural area. You know, that's why people are coming here. And if we're not careful, it's gonna be gone, it's gone forever. So I agree 100%. We need to move this process forward and see what Planning Commission comes back with. But we've got an amended motion. Do we have a second on the amended motion? Yes? So.
There is further discussion. So my further discussion is, what are we asking them to do? Alternatives to what? I've talked to staff about it, and they say they have no direction. Are we asking the Planning Commission to come up with direction? That doesn't make any sense to me. We ought to come up with a direction.
So that said, Supervisor Underwood, Sam, would you like to come up and give us some options here that?
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Yeah, what I've shown before and what was posted again on board docs today, what is exactly what was presented to the Rules Committee. And Supervisor Underwood's mentioned in there, we do have some ideas, but they're very high-level ideas. And they're just examples that are out there already today. It would be helpful to get, you know, consensus from the board to some degree about whether we develop a model that does decrease the density in A1RA. It'd be helpful to have the board, you know, come to a consensus whether a rural cluster is an option that should be considered or not considered. Those are the type of high-level things that I think would be helpful for the staff and for the Planning Commission. And I think, hearing some of the comments, that seems to be an indication that that's the case to move forward. The one particular attachment that's up there today are potential options. And those potential options, range the gamut, from keeping things the way they are today, but potentially allowing for a cluster type option as far as densities, keeping things the way they are today. Increase the minimum lot size. There was some mention about potentially, not going too high or doing that type of option, but that is another option. Developing a sliding scale type density, which means basically if you have a 0 to 10 acres, you get one, you building unit, 50 to 100, you get 5 or whatever. There's different ways to go about doing a sliding scale. Some of our neighbors do have that type of scheme today, and have had for years. So those are the type of things that we would work on with the Planning Commission, Mr. Chairman, and we're happy to do that if directed this morning to begin that conversation. I do appreciate the extension of the time frame. Any type of zoning and subdivision consideration, it should take time, especially for something of this magnitude. It would involve at least a minimum of 2 public hearings, one with the Planning Commission and one with the Board of Supervisors, to receive public input. I would hope that we would actually have a work session with the Planning Commission first before we go right into a public hearing with options, because I would like to hear from the Planning Commission as far as their suggestion of options as well, before we engage the public further to seek formal public comments. We're already getting them, but that would be the formal public process at that point. But just the high-level things, to Supervisor Underwood's point, it would be helpful to have the board reach consensus on a couple of major points that have been shown, with the Rules Committee.
Best interest to reduce the density. Now, whether or not the minimum lot size changes or not, but at least the density of those would be significantly reduced. I think the cluster option is a good option to ensure that we maintain larger parcels of land for farming activities. And I know there was options in there about road requirements
Right,
and
yes,
things
ma'am.
like that. I don't know that we should put the full burden of going full VDOT requirements, but at least get us to a point where we don't run into the issues of some of these private roads that we have currently. So those are some of the options that I think that should put us in a good direction to accomplish what the comprehensive plan is asking.
Sam, were you suggesting a work session between the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission to talk about this?
I wasn't necessarily suggesting that. I was suggesting, just, it depends on the direction of the board, of course, but I mean that we, as a Planning Commission with staff working, I'm gonna need a work session with them. And I'm just saying that builds in time and months. Typically we meet once a month, maybe twice a month with a work session. But it's gonna take a little bit of time just with them. The board certainly has the option of having a work session jointly with the Planning Commission. I wasn't necessarily suggesting that. I was suggesting a work session with the Planning Commission, then coming back up to the board from there, through their own process.
First, I'm not sure that there's consensus on any of the ideas that Supervisor Gugino threw out. So, one, I don't know that there's consensus for that. I support none of them. And so I do not support taking rights from those in A1 and RA. And I'm not saying all rights, I'm saying taking rights. Reducing density equals taking rights. Yeah. And so we need to, I guess, first have a consensus with that. And then 2, talking with those in our neighboring county, Fauquier, I don't support a scheme like that. I don't support requiring a deed restriction in order to be able to subdivide. But if there's a majority of this board that will support deed restrictions, we need to know that too, because if not, how can staff go forward? then 3, the number one question I've got from my constituents is, what about the current scheme? They're being restricted by time. Are we going to have a grace period? And if so, how long is it going to be? And the board needs to consider that, because that's what all the calls are about. People are worried because we're telling them they got to wait, and now we're telling them, well, we're going to change it. We're going to take your rights, but we're not telling you how long you have before we're going to take your rights.
Mr. Chairman, to follow Ms. Gugino, I think that the board has got to look at the possibility of making some changes relative to densities. If we don't, we will wind up being what nobody here wants to see. We'll have houses in every zoning district. And I think you need to look at the amount of residential zoning that is sitting out there that is currently being developed and it can be developed in the future. So I believe strongly in being able to cluster, but you've got to cluster at a smaller density than what we have now. So if the intent is to try to maintain rural atmosphere, and as our comprehensive plan says, to foster, to support, and move agriculture forward and try to keep agriculture as a part of this community, through the cluster, you do that because you've used your development rights up, and then you have open land left. Without land, you're not going to have farmers. And so you're going to have houses. That's what you're going to be raising instead of crops and cattle and whatever else. But ultimately, to your question, Mr. Underwood, if the board determines to make a decision and make a definitive change, at the time that change occurs is when it occurs, when the board votes. So if whatever time the board were to vote, should they vote, then anybody can do whatever they want under the old ordinance. But I think legally, from a standpoint of once the board makes a decision, if they make a change, that is the end of it.
I believe that there are other counties that when they have made changes have offered grace periods. I would ask if it is legal to offer a grace period.
I think that's a good question, because I know prior rezonings that the board has done, there wasn't a legal option there, but the board did allow one. It wasn't legal, but it was done.
Well, time-based subdivision isn't legal, and we're doing it now. So I have a feeling that by opening this can of worms, we are going to regret it. And even those who are all in favor of reducing density, I think we're going to be sitting here a year from now having regretted that we're going down this path. Amen. And I would also ask, hopefully just the board can have the conversation today, but with that, if we're going to go down the path, let's offer some high-level guidance. So either let's get some consensus on what Supervisor Gugino has recommended. Let's get some answers on what I'm stating relative to, are we going to do deed restrictions or not? Do we want to consider it? Are we worried at all about time base? Are we just going to say, no, the time base goes till whenever we make a change, and then if you're waiting, you're out of luck. So if you're sitting there waiting for September, as one of my constituents called, and if we make this change in August, that constituent's just out of luck? Is that what we're saying? Let's be clear.
Mr. Chairman, I believe that the motion we have before us is to move this to the Planning Commission for further study and to have some options come back to the board. I am not prepared today to support what Ms. Gugino has proposed. I think they are decisions that need to be looked at. They're very long-range decisions. We need this to be studied, and we need some time with it. And I think moving it to the Planning Commission is the way to do that. Now, if there's another format that we think this should take, okay. But right now, it seems to me, going to the Planning Commission, allowing time for public input there, I believe we can work with the Planning Commission as this moves forward. But I think it's time to do this. It's not time today to make firm decisions as to where we want to end up. I don't think we know that yet.
Agree with that.
That's what's being asked, and that's what I'm taking from your comments, is you want to put the board in, we want to make the decisions now versus have staff work with the planning commission. And I agree with Ms. Gugino on a hybrid model, and I think I brought that up in the past, was saying that I don't think there's going to be one size fits all, but I do believe that if you look at a model from other counties that has worked, you know, granted, that would be something that we want to look long and hard at, and how we can implement that into what we're trying to do. But as for the legality of, and I remember January 2020, Tom, that was one of your remarks that, hey, we're going to get sued tomorrow because of time-based subdivision. Here we are 5 years later. But again, I just don't want to get into a situation that, you know, that we're making a rush decision. I think the proper course of action is Sam and staff know what the end goal is, where we want to end up in September.
Well,
With the options for us to look at.
well, to know the end goal, we have to state what the end goal is.
The end goal is to preserve as much rural property as we can, the farmland. In other words, if it requires us to go with clustering, and I've heard the comment, well, I'll never be able to afford a piece of land again. But if you're taking a piece of property that has 20 lots or 25 lots that can be subdivided today, and you go with a clustering that we did away with the time-based subdivision, that he could go in and ask for his 25 lots tomorrow, to me, that's benefiting the landowner more than it is, or if you had reduced the density, if it was 25 lots before, and let's just say you went with 20, and you could develop it tomorrow, and I'm just pulling numbers, these are just general numbers, but this is what I want to see staff work on.
But first question, just to be clear, whether the goal is to reduce density or not, staff at least needs to know that, don't they?
Yes, it is to reduce density, that's,
Well, that, I don't know if we have consensus for that, but if we
Okay.
do, that would be important to know before we, because if we're not, if we don't even tell them that, I think we're telling them to increase density.
so who on here feels that we're in the process of increasing density, on the board? That's-
I hope so.
well, that's a given, Tom.
I think that, as we started out, we talked about the comprehensive plan, and the way the comprehensive plan describes the environment here in Culpeper. And I've tried to find it here in the write-ups, I know it's somewhere. But I believe that is a direction that can be given to the Planning Commission to begin this process. I don't believe when you start down a road to look at changes, yeah, you want to have some ideas of what you want to get to, but they need to be pretty broad. To say that we want to lower density or raise density, that is not the question today, I don't think. The question today is, we have a comprehensive plan that says we want to maintain the rural character of Culpeper County. And we're saying to the Planning Commission, what is the best way to go forward to do that?
Our comprehensive plan has said that since 1984, I believe. So therefore, because the comprehensive plan says that, that isn't a mandate to go say we want to reduce density. So if we're saying that all we want to do is follow the comprehensive plan, great. If, by the way, if the comprehensive plan did mean we want to reduce density, I wouldn't have voted for it. We should have been clear in the plan.
So I do have quotes from the plan. So in the land use and development was goal 1, maintain a balanced growth approach that shifts development pressure away from outlying agricultural and rural areas and directed to the urban services boundary and identified future growth areas. Action item specifically says to keep use densities and intensities to a minimum as to limit urban sprawl in the countryside. Continue utilizing the districts to prevent farming. And then the one that says to revise the ordinances such as acreage requirements and minor subdivision rules to limit the amount and impact of development in areas outside the identified growth areas. That is basically page 217 on our comprehensive plan.
I don't believe, and maybe I'm wrong, but if the citizens thought our comprehensive plan meant that we were going to reduce density in A1 and RA, As a member of the board that voted for it, that was not my understanding at all.
The number one question I get from my constituents, how are you gonna slack this growth up and protect our farmland? I mean, and it's just that simple. And that's what's driven me to be standing where I am today. And
So I guess, okay, then I still haven't heard for or a consensus say that the goal is to reduce density. So if we don't have a consensus for that, we just have a broad consensus for the planning commission to look at it, I guess.
Mr. Chairman and colleagues, once again, I would like to state that this is such a complex issue involving so many people, so much land, so much acreage, so many passions for what we do and where we live. I, again, reiterate my stance that I believe that we need to look into at least hiring an independent consultant to help manage all of us as we try to move forward and trying to find a way that we can accomplish this to everybody's benefit and satisfaction as much as possible.
That's a motion, we got a motion on the floor. That one I'd support.
Supervisor Lee, to address the concern you had with the citizen input, I mean, keep in mind that each district had basically a town hall when this comprehensive plan was being reviewed. And again, the concerns were brought forth that, you know, what are we gonna do to preserve our rural characteristics and farmland? So that's how this ended up in the comp plan.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other discussion or comments regarding the motion on the floor?
Repeat the motion.
It's,
Motion was to put a board, that the board of supervisors recommend staff and planning commission to develop ordinance amendment. Sorry, it shut off. The board of directors direct the planning staff to work with the planning commission to develop ordinance amendments options regarding the regulation of subdivisions in the A1 and RA zoning districts, and that those options be brought to the board for discussion in the September meeting.
So this is just for the subdivision ordinance then, to be clear?
No, it's for the zoning and subdivision ordinances.
No density issue.
not at this point, no. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Sellis, that's 5-2. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Moving on to the E911 Board.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to report there are no action items.
Public Safety.
No action items.
And moving on to item 7.0, Economic Development Report. Brian Rothmel will give an economic report.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Wanted to go over an update on the strategic plan. We will go over all of it. I also have copies. We have a new pretty version. The last one you had was with our old logo, redesigned. If you want a fresh copy, also available online. First, we'll start with goal 1, which is for Choose Culpeper. That is to bring new money into the county. As you see these squares or rectangles to the side, that's to give you an idea of kind of where we are in this plan. This plan was first adopted or brought to you last year. It's a 3-year plan for 23, 24, and 25. Green meaning we're sailing. We're doing really well. Keep going with how I feel we're going through the plan. Yellow, we're making progress. Maybe not exactly where the goal was yet, but we're getting there. Red being there's a lot more work to get done. So for 1.1, retain and foster expansion of current major employers, we're doing well on this. It's just we still, that is one that will probably we'll always be working for, always making sure that our current business climate's going well. There are things that we will be looking at over the next year and a half, specifically as the market is changing with current employers. Current employers sometimes looking at things such as automation. Do we have the business climate ready for growth that is happening in the market, but maybe not involving a lot more employees, as the struggle for workforce is still occurring. To grow the Culpeper County economy with attraction of new businesses, I think we've done very well with that in our first year and a half. And then strengthen the workforce pipeline. We've made a lot of progress on this. I still would like to do more with the public schools, especially with our CTE program. You see some of the work that's gone in. Of course, we have the data bank, data campus, as well as work in Culpeper. Very proud of that. Very excited about that first year. We had 30 jobs posted for the job fair that happened at CTEC this past year. The students really appreciated being able to research jobs before the job fair. Of course, we had United Electric, like to see more of that expansion of the economy to service area businesses, and then the Culpeper Tech Zone, the work that we're doing to make that a smooth landing for the data campuses that we've attracted. For Be a Culpeper Local, that's once money comes into the county, keeping that circulating as much as possible. Here you see strengthen Be a Culpeper Local's reach. I went back and forth on if that should be green or yellow. That's another one where I feel like we've done a lot of work. We still are making progress on that. Be a Culpeper Local Week has gone really well. I'm really excited about that, but still want to, the hardest thing for Be a Culpeper Local is businesses know about it as a Shop Local campaign, and we're trying to make sure that they understand the resources that come to them with it, and we're still making progress on that. We've done a lot on 2.2, the Develop a Robust Business Assistance Program, as you see with C3 that's coming up, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, coming up on Monday, as well as area resources, bringing in more resources that are in the county for our business owners. And then the Expand Retail and Mixed Use Developments, this one has been hard. We have had a lot of conversation, whether it's retail, convenience store, hotel. There's a lot of, it's a lot of uphill battle on that. We work very diligently on that, but we have not seen the progress that we were hoping for so far. Some of the things that have happened, we've had more classes in our budget that we'll have for next year. We'll even have monthly lunch and learns available through the SBDC that'll be happening here in Culpeper. We're excited to announce that. Of course, the Be a Culpeper Local Week and the participation with that, C3, and then all the work that CIC has been bringing to the county. For Choose Culpeper Farms, that's our ag development program. I'm really excited on the work that's happened here. You know, we started when we picked our strategic plan and we basically were starting on the ground floor with it. I think the Choose Culpeper Farms brand is going well. It's further along than I thought we'd be so far in. We've also maintained Culpeper Harvest Days. You see that especially with the Culpeper Corner. We're having different farms interacting with the farm tour that haven't previously. I really appreciate that. And then, of course, the advancement of the agriculture sector. Some of that has been events that we were planning on going to understand more things across the Commonwealth did not occur. So we're looking forward to learning more of what we can do to help with that ag development. And then here's some of the things that you've seen. You have the farm tour there in the center. Sips of Culpeper has been very, very well received in the community. We've already had people complete both tiers, both the tier 1, so they've gotten their pint glasses and as well as their hat. We're looking forward to next year hopefully launching more trails that would go through different explorations of Culpeper County and the ag sector. So that's where we're at about a year and a half in. Pretty excited with that. Coming up on Monday, we have the Culpeper County Conference, C3, which will be 8:30 to 1:30 p.m. at Germanna Community College. Hope businesses can attend. And then also the Culpeper Business Appreciation Reception, May 13th, 4 to 6 p.m. at the Mulberry at Old Trade. Food will be provided at both events, free registration. Businesses feel free to scan the QR code or go to beaculpeperlocal.com/May13th to register. So far, our registration for Culpeper Conference is higher than we had last year, so we're looking forward to that.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions, comments?
Yes, just relative to looking at recruiting a hotel, reach out to me. I'm a little bit familiar with that.
Yeah.
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 Any other comments? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And there is no administrator's report. Moving on to 9.0, I'll entertain a motion to move into closed session.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we enter into closed meeting as permitted under Virginia Code annotated section 2.2-3711A 3, 6, 7, 8, and 29 to receive legal advice regarding the potential options, limitations, and liability considerations as to the legal structuring of a jail facility as detailed in the Virginia Code of the Virginia Administrative Code and under other applicable law, and to discuss and consider the acquisition of real property, a jail facility, the award of a public contract, and the investment of public funds therein, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the financial interest, bargaining position, and/or negotiating strategy of the board if made public initially, and receive legal advice and to discuss potential litigation related to a public contract where consultation in an open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating/litigating posture of the board/county.
All in favor of going into closed session, signify by saying aye. Aye. We're in closed session. Thank you all.